pot of human flesh sat simmering over the fire. Beside it, delicate teacups with cobalt blue glaze, arranged as if for afternoon tea. But this wasn't the beginning. In the winter of 1847, rescuers found Lewis Keseberg alone in a cabin at Donner Lake, surrounded by the mutilated remains of those who'd starved beside him. George Donner's jewelry lay in his possession, $250 in gold. And Tamsen Donner, the schoolteacher who'd refused to abandon her dying husband, was nowhere to be found. What happened in those final months would haunt America for generations. But the true horror? Archaeologists would discover it wasn't what the survivors said. It was what they buried in the snow. Tamsen Donner wasn't supposed to die in the mountains. She was a schoolteacher from Massachusetts, educated and cultured, traveling west with her husband George and their 5 daughters. At 45, she carried books in her wagon, writing slates for the children, fine china wrapped carefully in quilts, because civilization, she believed, traveled with you. The Donner Party left Springfield, Illinois on April 15, 1846, 87 people, 23 wagons. They were chasing the promise of free California land, following the tried route until Fort Bridger, where a man named Lansford Hastings convinced them to take his shortcut. The shortcut added 3 weeks. By late October, exhausted and behind schedule, they approached the Sierra Nevada. George Donner's hand, cut while repairing a wagon axle, had turned black with infection. On October 31st, the first snow fell. Then it didn't stop. The party split into 2 camps, most families sheltered in crude cabins at Truckee Lake. The Donners, George, Tamsen, their 5 daughters, plus George's brother Jacob and his family, made camp 6 miles back at Alder Creek. 21 people total. They erected shelters from pine boughs and wagon canvas, dug partially into the ground. The snow reached 10 feet by mid-November. Patrick Breen, at the lake camp, began keeping a diary. "Began to snow this morning," he wrote on November 20th. They had no idea what waited for them, or that some of them would become something they'd never imagined. The first to die was Bayless Williams on December 15th. Starvation. The oxen had wandered off in the storm, disappearing into the white. The party's main food source, gone. They boiled the leather hides from their wagon covers, roasted bones they'd already gnawed clean. Tamsen, the schoolteacher, kept her daughters occupied with lessons on the writing slate, as if normalcy could protect them. By January, the lake camp residents were eating anything. Patrick Breen's diary entries grew shorter, more desperate. Dull prospect for any kind of comfort. On December 16th, 15 people strapped on makeshift snowshoes and attempted to walk to California. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. 33 days later, only 7 emerged from the mountains, having survived by eating their dead companions. In February, the first rescue party finally reached the camps. What they found made grown men weep. At the lake camp, skeletal figures emerged from holes in the snow. A woman asked, "Are you men from California, or do you come from heaven?" Around the cabins, they found human bones, cracked open, the marrow extracted. But what police found next made no sense, because the horror at Alder Creek was different. When rescuers reached the Donner family tents at Alder Creek, they saw Teamster Jean-Baptiste Trudeau carrying a human leg. When he noticed them, he threw it into a hole in the snow containing Jacob Donner's mostly dismembered body. Inside the first tent, Elizabeth Donner refused to eat. Her children were being kept alive by their father's organs. In the second tent, Tamsen Donner sat with her dying husband. George's hand infection had spread to his shoulder, turning the flesh black. He couldn't move, couldn't leave. Tamsen was offered rescue. Her 3 youngest daughters could come too. She refused. "I will not leave him," she told the rescuers. The second relief party arrived on March 1st. James Reed, who'd been banished from the party months earlier for killing a man in self-defense, led the group. He found more bodies, more evidence of cannibalism. At the lake camp, they discovered that Lewis Murphy's family was considering eating Milt Elliott's corpse. They found Elliott's mutilated body shortly after. Reed begged Tamsen again to leave. George was dying. A third rescue would come soon, he promised. Tamsen sent her 3 daughters, 6-year-old Frances, 4-year-old Georgia, 3-year-old Eliza, with Reed, but she stayed behind with George. The third rescue never came. George Donner died on March 13th, alone with his wife in the makeshift tent. Tamsen Donner made a decision. She wrapped up what remained of her family's money, $500 in gold and jewelry. She told the hired men to take it to California for her daughters. Then, while the snow still fell, she attempted to cross the mountains alone. Alone. A 45-year-old woman who'd taught school in Massachusetts, who'd carried teacups across the prairie, who'd kept her daughters reading during the winter of death. She made it 6 miles, to the lake camp, to Lewis Keseberg's cabin. On April 10th, almost a month after the third rescue left, a salvage party arrived to recover the Donners' belongings. They found George Donner's body in the tent at Alder Creek, dead only days. At the lake, they found Lewis Keseberg, alive, alone, well-fed. His story. Lewis Murphy died a week after the third rescue. Tamsen Donner arrived at his cabin weeks later, soaked and distraught. He gave her a blanket, told her to rest and leave in the morning. She died during the night, he said. The salvage party didn't believe him, because what they found in his cabin told a different story. A pot full of fresh human flesh, George Donner's pistols, his jewelry, $250 in gold. They found Tamsen Donner's heart and liver hanging from a nail. They threatened to lynch Keseberg on the spot. Keseberg confessed, not to murder, but to cannibalism. He'd eaten Tamsen Donner's body after she died, he claimed. He'd cashed the money she'd told him to save for her daughters. The rescuers didn't believe him then. Many historians don't believe him now. But the truth? It's buried deeper than anyone imagined. In 2003, archaeologists finally located the precise Donner family campsite at Alder Creek. Using ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation, they found the hearth. The artifacts, thousands of tiny bone fragments, burned and calcined. They found the cobalt-blue ceramic plate, broken where Tamsen or George had dropped it. The writing slate Tamsen used to teach her daughters. Bottle fragments from condiments. Attempts to make leather stew taste like food. Buttons from clothing stripped off the dead. And bones. Cut marks. Saw marks. Chop marks. But here's what disturbed researchers most. When they analyzed the bone fragments found at the Donner family site, they couldn't conclusively identify human remains. Unlike at the lake camp, where evidence of cannibalism was clear, the Alder Creek site remained ambiguous. What happened to Tamsen Donner? What really occurred in those final days? Lewis Keseberg was never charged. He returned to California society, where people whispered cannibal when he walked past. He tried running a restaurant. It failed. A hotel. It failed. For the rest of his life, he insisted he didn't murder Tamsen Donner. He died in 1895, taking the truth with him. The Donner Party tragedy changed how Americans viewed westward expansion. It exposed the dangers of untested shortcuts, the brutality of nature, the extremes of human survival. Of the 87 people who left Fort Bridger, only 45 survived. 36 were children, and most of them lived. Most of the dead were adults, particularly men. The 3 youngest Donner daughters survived. They were adopted by families in California, attended boarding school, grew up. Eliza Donner Houghton wrote a haunting memoir in 1911. During the bitterest weather, we little ones were kept in bed, and my place was always in the middle where Frances and Georgia, snuggling up close, gave me of their warmth. Today, Donner Memorial State Park sits at the site of the lake camp. A bronze plaque lists the names. Survived, died, survived, died. The Pioneer Monument rises 22 feet, the depth of the snow that winter. And at Alder Creek, where archaeologists found those delicate teacups and burned bone fragments, there's only wilderness. The trees have grown tall, the meadow is peaceful, but beneath the soil, the artifacts remain. The cobalt blue plate shards, the writing slate, the buttons, silent witnesses to what happened when civilization met the Sierra Nevada winter. To this day, no one knows for certain what happened to Tamsen Donner in her final hours, or what choice she made, if any, in that cabin with Lewis Keseberg. Some questions are buried too deep to answer.